Welcome. Today I'm going to do just a quick video because I just want to do a test. And what I'm going to do is I have some dice that I made before that I'm going to play with painting the numbers with UV resin. So I've got my UV resin that I normally use to just fill holes and stuff with. I've had this stuff probably for over maybe even 2 years by now, but I'm just going to mix this with maybe a little bit of powder. And mainly what I'm wanting to see, because I know this is going to be a lot more work than just painting, putting paint in there and wiping it off, letting it dry. With this, I'll have to put the resin in it, cure it, preferably layer by layer, where mine are a little bit deeper probably than most people's dice are. I like having deep numbers, it makes it easier to paint. And then I'd have to sand it off. So I'll end up having to sand all the faces again. These are ones that are already done and ready to be painted, but if I were to do this method, I would probably do it right after pulling them out of the molds before I sanded them anyway, so I only sanded them once. But I want to see if it will stay in there. I mean, I filled tiny holes and things, and even on the corners of my dice before, and it hasn't come off or anything, so it shouldn't, but I just want to make sure with this kind of test set of dice that if I use some UV resin in there for the numbers, that it's not going to pop them out or anything when you use them or if you drop them. Especially if I put a little bit of powder in there. It's probably going to be okay if you just use a liquid colorant, like an alcohol ink or something, but I don't really have anything that's going to come out very white, so I'm going to use a little bit of powder. And I have this little syringe that I'm going to use to kind of help apply it, even though this will probably work okay for most of the numbers on the bigger ones, but the smaller numbers on the D20, where I think my little nozzle thing is a little bit bigger than the numbers, it might not work as well, and it's probably mostly going to be just dabbing it in there and curing it and sanding off the excess, which might be better to be do with just a toothpick, dipping it in and putting it in as if I was filling holes. Especially for like the dots, where I have the dot for where the 6 is. Things like that are tiny. This is the smallest nozzle I have, but I also kind of want to see if the resin will be able to flow through that small of a hole. I got these mostly because I want to try using it for controlled squirts later for dice that you maybe want to have a little ink cloud in, so you can have your resin in there and then just put a little poof of a different color inside of it. That's kind of fun to do sometimes, and this is a little bit more controlled way of doing it than me just using a pipette and then just kind of guess swirling. But that might be for a later video. So let's go ahead and do this and see how that works. So I got my little cup here. I'm going to start with the 6 because it has the biggest numbers on it. It won't take much, but I have plenty of this and it's pretty old, so I'm going to use a bit. That's way more than I need, guaranteed. But it will also help with being able to have the right amount of color in there, because it's not going to take very much of this at all to put any color in it. Just a couple of squirts worth just to give a little bit of color. Some considerations to take in if you're going to try this. The color of your dye. So these are transparent, so that should be pretty easy to cure the UV resin from all angles. If it was opaque, you're pretty much only going to be able to cure what's on the top, so you might have to do it in smaller layers if possible. But it might be small enough that you might not have to do it in layers. And then also the color of your UV resin. So I'm going to put a lot more than that. That doesn't seem like it's as white as I want it to be. However much colorant you have in here may or may not affect how well the resin cures. And this really isn't very colorful. It's gonna be tough. Not really anything. Bloop. Bloop. That might not be an option for this, which really is just gonna dash my dreams of this being able to work for a different project later. Gonna have to just stick with the pipette. Yeah, that's not really working at all, is it? They do have different sized nozzles. We may end up just applying it with the toothpick. That's kind of working. But I'm going to tell you right now already, I can't see that number. What I could do instead of just using the light is I could fill a bunch of the top faces on all of them and stick them in a cure box. Hopefully there's no bubbles in there. It's not coming out. Okay, well, let's speed this up then. I'll fill the rest and cure them, sand them, and then see what we've got. But I'm going to say that's going to be too difficult for me to see what number that is. So what I may do, or what may be better, is to use more of an opaque color if possible. Definitely takes longer than just painting them would. Just in the putting the resin in and curing it, let alone the sanding later. And since we're already just playing with it, I think I'm just going to do this one dye, because I can already tell that it's not going to work at least how I want it to be able to see it. But the process works. Just darken this up. Shoot, I might even just do all the dyes this color. May have to see if I can chip those out. And that should be dark enough to see. Hopefully not too concentrated that it won't cure anymore. I do already like that a lot better. Video's already longer than I want it to be. That looks a lot better. So I'm going to go ahead and finish all these. You don't have to watch me do that. Okay, here's some final thoughts on this quick little project. Ended up just how I kind of thought it would. So, the difficulty with this, it looks cool if you can get it to work right. But for me, it's way too much time and effort. But, for example, let's see. I did the D6. The one is perfect. Like, that's the side of the face, right? It's perfectly in there. Looks great. Some 3 is okay. This is one that it wasn't flush, right? So it wasn't filled all the way. And those look okay. They just look like your normal numbers. The 6 was perfectly flush in there. Looks great, other than the fact that it had bubbles in it. And where's the 4? And this one I didn't sand down far enough, but it's already basically flush with the face almost. So I was just sanding down the face more than I wanted it to be sanded down, so I stopped. And also this one has a little bit of the white in there, which you'll notice because I started off with the white, but when you start shaving it off with the craft knife, if you're not careful, you can then pop the numbers out. You can get underneath the excess and it pops them out, which I actually did on purpose because I wanted it to be the blue, but you could easily do that on accident, which is not ideal. So for me, not a viable option unless I really love somebody. to try and make them some dice and try several times. Also, I didn't sand these other ones, but it's really tacky. I don't know if it's just because my UV resin is really old, or if it's because I have too much of the additives in the resin. But in any case, the sanded stuff isn't. You know, it's not tacky anymore. So, I don't know. This might be okay for like a jumbo die, something that's easier to do and easier to fill. Then you could consistently get it at least like this, where it's just not all the way completely to the top and you don't have to sand or anything, and you can just cure it and be done. But overall, I mean, that's up to you. The numbers do stay in, you know, just like with filling your holes. So, I mean, it looks really cool, but again, it's a lot of time and effort, a lot of sanding. If you want them to all be perfect, like this one is, you'd have to then go in again, fill some more, and if you did a custom mixture, you'd have to mix it exactly the same each time. Although the good thing about this is, you know, I can still use it, I can cover it, and I could use that maybe even days later. But that's just something to think about if you happen to want to do that. It's doable if you want to take the time and effort to do it. For me, not so much. But that's what this test was for. I'll leave it up to you if it's something that you think you want to do with your dice. It is kind of cool. It's just a long time of sanding and filling and curing and sanding. It reminds me of making masters from 3D printed ones, except for I think this might even take a little bit longer. About the same. I don't know. So, well, I hope this video has been somewhat helpful to you, at least giving you a little bit of ideas of how to do different designs and things in your die.